We've all heard of Formula 1, NASCAR, the World Endurance Championship and so on. Those of us who are motorsport nerds will also be aware of BTCC, V8 supercars, DTM and many more brilliant categories across the world. However, the wider world has never heard of a series that I would like to discuss today. This race series has been going for over 20 years, and despite existing in technically only one continent, this series boasts some of the closest on-track action you will see in any national motorsport. Since the introduction in 2001, the series has seen 16 different champions. In 2022, 36 different drivers competed throughout the season, with both race team-backed entries and privateers taking to the grid. Also in 2022, the champion won by just 6 points in a system where you can get up to 51 points per race. So, what is this series, I hear you asking? Well, before I answer that, let us go back a couple of years. The year was 1992. Ayrton Senna was the reigning Formula 1 world champion while watching the Williams cars drive off into the distance every race. The Cold War is officially over, and Michael Jackson doesn't care if you're black or white. In North Carolina at the Charlotte Motor Speedway, some officials came to the realization that motor racing is expensive.
Well, duh.
Shock, I know. But unlike the rest of us who just keep uttering the motto, one day, they actually did something about it. They needed a car that was low cost to run and required little maintenance throughout a racing season. Well, turns out a company already had a car that might just do the trick. The Dwarf Car Company, based in Arizona, was manufacturing 5/8 scale, steel body and fenderless version of a 1935 Ford Coupe. While not quite what they had in mind, the Dwarf car was adapted and then unveiled to the American press in the April of 1992. You probably recognise these cars from their dirt oval racing. The series was called Legends and started gaining popularity in America and began to race in Europe too. In the UK, these cars were used to race on normal racetracks, as oval racing, especially dirt racing, is not as popular as in the States. The series even went as far as Australia, racing as a minor category, again due to the lack of popularity in oval racing. This is where our story begins. Phil Ward is an Australian motorsport legend. Having started racing in 1969, the Aussie went on to have a successful career spanning nearly 30 years in predominantly national motorsport. According to the Aussie Racing Cars website, Phil had the idea for the cars and started developing one in the mid to late 90s without any mention of the American legend cars. This was right around the time that there was an influx of the legend cars in Australia, so it's probable that he saw these cars and decided to make his own version, although this is unconfirmed. Rather than the classic old school look of the American series, his were modelled on modern touring cars and named them Aussie Racing Cars. The cars held a motorbike twin-cam engine producing just 135 horsepower. However, with the entire car weighing in at just 500 kilos, these cars can outperform some full-size race cars on tighter tracks. Following a number of track days full of positive feedback about this little car, Phil Ward began a company to produce Aussie racing cars. The popularity of this was not lost on Phil, and in 2001, the series of Aussie racing cars was officially formed. So, now you know the history, what makes this series different? 1. The cars. Being produced in line with one another, Aussie Racing Cars is a spec series. Like IndyCar or Formula E, the cars are all the same underneath and teams are highly restricted in what changes they can make. Setup is practically as far as it goes, which means the driver makes the difference. As previously mentioned, the 500 kilo cars with just 135 horsepower provide a raw driving experience and can reach speeds in excess of 200 km an hour or 125 miles an hour. Due to the size, or lack thereof, the driver is centrally mounted like in a McLaren F1, and again due to the size, sits behind the door pillars, meaning an even weight distribution over the axles. Finally, similar to a go-kart, traction is determined by mechanical grip rather than aerodynamics. Sure, most cars have a spoiler of some sort, but the lack of aero means the cars can follow each other at full pace without the concern for dirty air. These cars are basically bigger and faster go-karts. 2. The drivers. Aussie Racing Cars attracts drivers of all ages and calibre. Many Australian pro drivers started their car racing career in these due to the significant cost difference compared to that of the Formula Ford series. Because of the simplicity of the cars, amateurs can participate in these races too. Middle-aged hobbyists take to the track alongside these young professionals, and there is a similar paced rival to any driver out there. These young hopefuls and older hobbyists also have the chance to race against partially retired pro drivers too. Some drivers choose a lower category of racing to spend their retirement savings on, and a few have chosen the Aussie Racing Cars series. Due to this accessibility, the field regularly consists of over 30 drivers per race. Parents and their kids, retired professionals, and young hotshots. The grids are so inclusive and so diverse that there is action literally everywhere. 3. The tracks. I'm sure you could easily drive these cars around a kart track. Don't forget they are only 5/8 scale. In fact, when Phil Ward was testing, he used a number of kart tracks to develop the cars. However, these cars race on full racetracks: Bathurst, The Bend, Adelaide Street Circuit, Sydney Motorsport Park, Wakefield Park, and more. Because these tiny cars race on full-scale circuits, you can fit more cars side by side round each corner, and that means more action on more of the track. Some tracks are so tight that other series struggle to overtake, whereas that's not really a problem for Aussie Racing Cars. 4. Exposure. One thing Australia has got seriously right is their exposure to lower categories of racing. The V8 Supercars, which is Australia's biggest series, use a wide variety of support categories across their racing season. Anything from Porsche Carrera Cup, S5000 cars, Formula V, Formula 4, their Super 2 and Super 3 feeder series, and even occasionally an insanely cool series called Stadium Super Trucks.
Well, here, not letting Robbie Gordon push him around, and we see a lot of side-by-side, high-flying action on the front stretch.
Spun, cracked the wheel, and almost rolled the road.
However, they also host rounds of Aussie Racing Cars, which is quite hilarious watching the size of the V8s versus these miniature pocket rockets. Another advantage of being a feeder series is the national coverage the series gets on TV. So, not only is the action amazing, but more people get to see and experience it. Now, if you've watched this and still aren't convinced, well then, this is just for you.
Throw a blanket over these 6 cars. Yeah, count them, 6.
Best passing opportunities.
Oh, they give each other a little bit of room in the later side.
Paddles.
The run again on the outside. Oh, yes. Someone has to give here. They're 3 wide. And Ensby's going to be the big winner here. He'll make up 2 spots. Brzezinski crosses the line there to keep on going. Heyman wins the race. I'm looking left, I'm looking right. And how about the move from Ensby? Staying off that yesterday, but how gutsy was that for a pass?
Around the outside.
Woods giving Duckworth a real hurry up as they bounce across these enormous curves on lap 1. Trying to push a gap open here with 3 wide on the run down, and now Duckworth takes the lead in car number 1. Will he be able to pull it up? No, he won't. No, they all go down.
Frame effect on these cars, using every bit of road and some.
He's caught all 3 of these guys. He's going to try and make it 3 wide for the second last corner. On the approach to the last lap, Clues barely saw him coming, and he'll take 2 of them. That is a fantastic move.
Slippery part of the road.
Gets it done nicely and stops and puts the car down the middle, but Robson pushes the door back open. He wants Ensby back in there side by side. They haven't touched. This is phenomenal stuff from the front 2 guys. The amount of times he's done that this weekend, sooner or later, we'll come back to the moment because he's taken the lead.
He'll be able to hold that position.
They stay together. They continue.
There we go.
Oh.
So with Robson on the outside, he's managed to get the power down.
The turn, it's Duckworth. He needs to get the car across. He's done that, but Woods isn't going to give up.
Outside, and then cross it over.
Oh, he's got him through.
Now that is racing. Thanks for watching.